All right, so today we're going to try to understand this incident that happened up in the air around Washington, D.C.
Yeah, this Black Hawk helicopter and an American Airlines plane colliding.
Yeah, and it's especially weird because this is, not just some random airspace.
No, no,
This is SFRA.
the SFRA, yeah, the Special Flight Rules Area, 30 nautical miles around D.C., very restricted.
Yeah, so to unpack this, we're going to be drawing on someone who's got a very unique perspective on this, Senator Tammy Duckworth.
Who, yes, is not only a senator, but also a former Black Hawk pilot.
Exactly, and an Iraq War veteran, so...
Yeah, so she knows what she's talking about.
Absolutely. And she's already started digging into this.
Yeah.
She's requested the air traffic control transcripts, the flight paths for both aircraft.
Oh, wow.
But here's what she's saying. So far, air traffic control did communicate with the helicopter crew
Okay.
twice, and they acknowledged both times.
So that raises the question of how did this happen?
Like, if everyone was talking to each other.
Yeah.
So to get into that, I think we need to understand what it's actually like to be in that Black Hawk cockpit.
Right.
And Senator Duckworth was describing, the pilot has to use all four limbs to control this thing.
Wow.
Direction power, the nose, even the tail.
Oh, my goodness.
It sounds more like wrestling an octopus than flying a helicopter.
Yeah, that's intense.
So while one pilot's doing that, the other's busy communicating with air traffic control.
Right, and you've also got the crew chief in the back who's scanning for traffic.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So you've got this demanding airspace.
Yeah.
You're flying pretty low. You've got constant communication. What kind of pressure does that put on a pilot?
I mean, think about it. It's like trying to rub your belly and pat your head at the same time while riding a unicycle.
Yeah.
You've got all these things going on. You've got to maintain this perfect situational awareness.
Oh, man.
It's a recipe for cognitive overload.
I'm already feeling stressed just thinking about it.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, this was all happening at night.
Right.
So wouldn't it make sense to be using night vision goggles?
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
But Senator Duckworth pointed out that those aren't always the best solution.
Okay.
They work great in pitch darkness, like if you're in a combat situation.
Mm-hmm.
But D.C. is a very bright city.
Yeah, lots of lights.
Lots of ambient light and night vision goggles can actually make it harder to see in those conditions.
Really?
Yeah, because they amplify existing light. So in an urban environment, all that light pollution, it can create distortions, like bloom and halo effects.
Oh, so it just makes it harder to distinguish things.
Exactly. It's like turning up the volume on a noisy radio.
Oh, I see.
You're getting more signal, but also more static.
So instead, they were flying under visual flight rules.
Right, relying on their natural eyesight.
Okay, well, that raises another question. How much can a pilot actually see from the cockpit?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Especially compared to what a driver sees
Right.
on the road.
Well, Senator Duckworth described the Black Hawk cockpit as like a plexiglass bubble. So they've got a much wider field of vision than, say, a commercial plane with those small windows.
Oh, that's interesting.
But even with that,
Yeah.
we have to consider the right-of-way.
Right, because, who's supposed to get out of the way when two aircraft are on a collision course?
Exactly. That's the rule of the road. Or should I say the rule of the sky?
Right, the rule of the sky.
And in this case, despite the helicopter's potentially better visibility, the landing plane had the right-of-way.
Oh, so even if the helicopter crew saw the plane first,
Yeah.
they would have had to maneuver to avoid it.
Exactly. And that just adds another layer of complexity to this whole situation, because now you're not only trying to fly the aircraft, you're also trying to figure out who has the right of way.
And making decisions in a split second.
Right. It's like a high-stakes game of chess.
Wow. So let me just recap here. We've got a low-flying helicopter,
Yeah.
potentially better visibility, but the landing plane has the right of way. How much pressure does that put on a pilot when all this is happening in a split second?
It's a lot to process you're trying to take in your instruments. The radio chatter, what you see outside the right-of-way rules, all while maintaining control of this complex aircraft.
Yeah.
It's a lot to juggle.
So we've got restricted airspace, nighttime conditions, communication, visibility, right of way. It's like a perfect storm of factors.
Yeah, and let's not forget the human element. The pilots, the air traffic controllers.
Right.
Everyone's making decisions under pressure.
Yeah, you can talk about all the technology and regulations in the world, but at the end of the day, it's humans making those split-second judgments. So how do we even begin to unpack this?
Well, that's where the investigation comes in.
Right.
And that's what we're going to be talking about next.
Okay, so buckle up, folks, because we're about to go deep into the world of aviation investigation.
This is going to be interesting.
Let's do it. It's like we're trying to solve a mystery, right? piecing together the clues from all these different sources. So what are the big things that investigators are going to be looking at to understand how this happened?
Yeah, it's a very structured process. Think of it like a forensic investigation, but for the sky.
Okay.
So they're going to start by gathering all the available data.
Okay, so like what kind of stuff?
We're talking the black box recordings, the radar data, air traffic control communications, weather reports, anything and everything that could shed light on what happened leading up to the collision.
Okay, so that's like the data gathering
Yeah.
phase? What happens next? Do they just like lock themselves in a room with a giant whiteboard and start connecting the dots?
Pretty much, yeah. They meticulously analyze all that data, looking for patterns, discrepancies, anything out of the ordinary.
So it's real detective work.
Oh, yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. They'll reconstruct the flight paths, the communication timeline, everything, trying to build a minute-by-minute picture of what happened.
Wow, it sounds pretty intense. And I imagine with all that data, it can be kind of overwhelming. So how do they even know where to start?
Well, that's where experience and expertise come in. These
Yeah.
investigators are like seasoned detectives. They're trained to spot those subtle clues that others might miss.
So they're looking for like communication errors, pilot fatigue, mechanical malfunctions, that kind of thing.
Exactly. They're looking for anything that could have contributed to the incident. Sometimes it's a single mistake, but more often than not, it's a combination of factors, this perfect storm of events that leads to tragedy.
And speaking of factors, there's been a lot of speculation going around about what might have caused this. Some pretty high-profile folks have even weighed in. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, President Trump have all offered their opinions.
Right. And it's understandable. People want answers. People want to make sense of these things. But it's important to remember that speculation can sometimes hinder the investigation.
Yeah, you don't want assumptions and opinions getting in the way of the facts. And it seems like Senator Duckworth was really trying to emphasize that point. She's been very vocal about the need for a thorough, unbiased investigation.
Absolutely. She's right to call for patience and let the experts do their job. It's important to resist that urge to jump to conclusions and let the evidence guide the investigation.
Okay, so back to the investigation. Let's say they've analyzed all the data, they've reconstructed the events, and they've identified some potential contributing factors. What happens then?
Well, then they move into the testing and validation phase.
Okay.
So they might run simulations, conduct interviews, even recreate certain scenarios, to test their hypotheses.
So they're really trying to make sure that their conclusions are solid.
Exactly. It's about building a rock-solid case based on evidence, not just speculation.
And what about the human element?
Yeah.
How do they factor in things like pilot experience, stress decision-making, all that stuff?
Oh, that's a critical aspect of the investigation. They'll look into the pilot's training records, their experience in similar situations, even their psychological state at the time of the incident.
So do they actually like interview the pilots as part of this?
Absolutely. Those interviews are crucial, but they're also conducted with a lot of sensitivity. It's about understanding the pilot's actions, not judging them.
Right, because they were operating under immense pressure.
Exactly. Even the most experienced pilots can make mistakes, especially in high-pressure situations.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that we're all human.
We are.
And even in these highly technical fields, there's always a margin for error.
And that's precisely why these investigations are so important. It's not about assigning blame. It's about learning from those errors and improving safety procedures to prevent them from happening again.
This whole incident has really highlighted that tension between security and flexibility, especially in a space like the SFRA. When you want to keep the airspace around D.C. secure, but you also don't want to cripple air traffic.
It's a tough balancing act for sure, and incidents like this force us to re-examine our protocols and ask some tough questions. Is there a way to enhance security without sacrificing flexibility? Can technology play a bigger role in mitigating risk?
It sounds like this could be a catalyst for some serious changes in the way we manage our airspace. Are there any specific areas you think they'll be focusing on?
Well, I think communication protocols will definitely be under scrutiny. Were there any gaps or ambiguities in the information relayed between air traffic control and the pilots? Could technology help improve clarity and reduce the potential for miscommunication?
Yeah, because even a slight misinterpretation or delay could have huge consequences.
Absolutely. They'll also be looking at the training procedures for pilots operating within the SFRA. Is it rigorous enough? Does it adequately prepare them for the unique challenges of this airspace?
While we're on the topic of training, I've always wondered how pilots are trained to handle those split-second decisions when things go wrong.
Yeah.
Is there some kind of simulator that can replicate those high-pressure scenarios?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There are some incredibly sophisticated simulators out there that can replicate pretty much any scenario you can imagine. Engine failure, severe weather, even mid-air collisions.
Wow, so they can really put pilots through the ringer.
Oh, yeah, they're designed to push pilots to their limits. Train them to react calmly and effectively under extreme pressure.
That's like boot camp for the mind.
Exactly.
I guess that's why pilots have that reputation for being so cool under pressure.
It's not just a stereotype, it's a necessity. Their training instills in them this deep understanding of aircraft systems, emergency procedures, and decision-making under duress.
So, while this incident is a tragedy, it also highlights the incredible skill and dedication of the people who work to keep our skies safe.
Couldn't agree more. And it's a reminder that even in the face of these events, there are lessons to be learned, procedures to be improved, and ultimately a commitment to making air travel even safer for everyone.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the world of aviation safety, and I'm sure our listeners are feeling the same way.
It's a world that we don't often think about, but it's one that deserves our attention and appreciation.
So before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, this idea of looking at what went right.
Yes. The often overlooked aspect of accident analysis, focusing on the successes, those actions that might have prevented the situation from escalating further.
Exactly, because even in a tragedy like this, there might be some hidden triumphs, decisions that mitigated the damage or even saved lives.
Right. Maybe there was a communication from air traffic control that alerted the pilots to the potential danger, giving them those precious seconds to react. Or perhaps the pilots executed an evasive maneuver that, while not preventing the collision, entirely minimized the impact.
Yeah, it's like searching for those silver linings in a dark cloud, and finding those can be just as valuable as identifying what went wrong.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing those unsung heroes, those moments of skill and quick thinking that might have made all the difference.
It's a good reminder that even in the face of adversity, there's always room for hope and a chance to learn from both our successes and our failures.
Beautifully said, and perhaps those lessons can guide us toward a future where incidents like this become even rarer and the skies become a safer place for everyone.
Well, on that hopeful note, let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've learned in this deep dive. Well, we've really gone deep, haven't we? From, the initial shock of this whole thing to like the nitty-gritty details of the investigation, all the things they're looking at, the potential ways to improve. I feel like I've learned a ton.
Yeah, me too. And it really drives home this point that, aviation safety, it's not static. It's always evolving.
Right. It's not just like setting some rules and hoping for the best.
No, it's this constant process, of learning, adapting, always striving to make things better.
And it's not just about like the technology or the regulations either, right? It's about the people.
It is.
The pilots, air traffic controllers, engineers, everyone's working together in this super complex system.
Absolutely. It's a delicate balance between human skill and technological precision.
Yeah, and we've been talking about how that human element, it can be both a strength and a weakness.
Right.
We've seen how skilled these pilots are, how they can make these incredible split-second decisions under pressure, but we also have to acknowledge that even the best of the best can make mistakes.
Especially in those high-stress situations.
Yeah, so it's crucial to have those systems in place that can catch those errors.
Right, to have that redundancy, that backup, and a culture where mistakes aren't seen as failures, but as opportunities to learn.
Totally. So as we're wrapping up here, I'm kind of left with this feeling of awe, I guess?
Yeah.
But also cautious optimism. Awe at just how complex this whole world of aviation is.
It is.
And the dedication of all the people who keep us safe up there.
Yeah.
And then optimism that, we can learn from this and things will continue to get better.
I agree. I think this incident, while, obviously a tragedy, it really highlights that safety, it's not a destination, it's a journey.
Yeah, it's a constant process of evaluating, adapting, and never giving up on that pursuit of improvement.
Yeah.
So for our listeners out there, I hope this deep dive has piqued your interest in aviation, all the systems that keep us flying and that constant quest for safer skies.
Maybe some of you are even thinking about a career in aviation now.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
The world needs more people like that, curious minds, problem solvers, people dedicated to making the world a safer, more efficient place.
So whether you're already an aviation geek or, just starting to explore this world, just remember there's always something new to learn, something to discover.
And something to contribute.
Absolutely.
So on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. The next time you see a plane up in the sky, take a moment to really appreciate all the human ingenuity, the technology, and the dedication that makes it all possible.
Keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop seeking a deeper understanding of the world around you.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep looking up.